Musical Talk, the UK's independent musical theatre podcast. And welcome to another edition of Musical Talk, the UK's independent musical theatre podcast. I'm Thos Ribbits, and when I want a melody rolling round the house, then I want a melody by Strouse. Now, you might know those lyrics. They actually come from a Gershwin song, which actually the Gershwins used to sing privately at parties, but which got fame when it was inserted into a show in the 1930s by Vincente Minnelli, and eventually, of course, got into the film version of An American in Paris. But whilst the Strouse being referred to by the singer is, of course, actually the Strouse family, the writers of those great Viennese waltzes, today I think it makes a very appropriate start to the first of two tributes that Musical Talk is going to pay to the great Charles Strouse, one of the great Broadway composers of the late 20th century, and a man whose work, in fairness, is sometimes overshadowed by the greater names, the greater lights of Sondheim and Herman. And yet, when you look at the absolutely enormous legacy that he's left us, the great pantheon of works, spanning over 50 years, incidentally, and with some top-notch shows and some top-notch songs, then I think history will remember Charles Strouse very positively. And anyone who loves musical theatre will certainly do so. Now, long-term listeners may remember that I've had the privilege of meeting Charles twice and interviewing him. And over the course of these two episodes, this week and next, we'll be revisiting those two interviews that I conducted. The first was recorded in 2009 when Charles, a mere 81-year-old, was in London being celebrated quite rightly for his many talents over many years. Friday Night is Music Night, a long-running radio tradition here in the United Kingdom, had dedicated an entire 2-hour concert to Charles, and as Ken Bruce, the host of that show, had said, everyone knows a Charles Strouse song. And I know from personal conversations with Charles that he was hugely touched that that concert had been put on with his work in his honour. And whilst he was in London, Charles consented to be interviewed by me in front of a crowd of British composers, and that is going to be the conversation that we hear later today. And Charles was such a charming man, and we rather hit it off on that occasion, so he was kind enough to let me interview him again, one-to-one this time, a few weeks later on a Sunday afternoon in a London hotel off Piccadilly. And in that conversation we were able to explore some of the more unusual parts of his writing career. But who was Charles Strouse, or Charles Louis Strouse, I should say, born on the 7th of June 1928? His biggest shows, I think, are probably Annie. Everyone knows Annie. But also Bye Birdie, a show which has been filmed on a number of occasions and features the wonderful song Cads, originally sung by the priceless Paul Lynde, Paul Lynde, as you might better know him, and more recently by the late George Wendt in a remake of the same film. But Charles had also written All American with Ray Bolger, Golden Boy with Sammy Davis Jr., It's a Bird, It's a Plane, It's Superman, and Applause, based on All About Eve and featuring Lauren Bacall. And later in his career he wrote Dance a Little Closer, and one of my all-time favourites, Nick and Nora. And for children, he wrote songs for Charlotte's Web, a 1989 musical, and the film All Dogs Go to Heaven. And his last recorded show was Martin, a new American musical from 2011, which, when you bear in mind Bye Bye Birdie was 1960, that's an amazing span for a career. And the list of shows I've given you is by no means complete. There are so many more. And I'm briefly going to say Annie alone spawned 2 sequels, the second of which was called Annie Warbucks, and that musical contains one of my all-time favourite musical songs, It Would Have Been Wonderful, which for me is one of the most poignant songs ever written. If you don't know it, do try and find it. But what of Charles as a person? Well, I found Charles to be exactly the same character as comes across so clearly in his autobiography called Put on a Happy Face. A very, very modest man. And yet a man who, in my opinion, had so little to be modest about. He could not have been more personable, he could not have been more friendly, and he was certainly very honest and open about his own insecurities, but I think appreciative of the recognition that he received so often from so many people, including the greats, that he could occasionally bring himself to believe that he was also one of those greats. But he would never go so far as to say so, because of all things I think humility was the word that most easily described him. But I would like to add another. As you'll hear in this recording, for my money, he's one of the greatest writers of musicals in the second half of the 20th century. And whilst he's doing very different things, I would put him on the same pedestal on which I would put Jerry Herman and Stephen Sondheim. That's how great a man I think Charles Strouse was, and through his work and his legacy, still is. Let's now hear that conversation I recorded in 2009 when Charles was visiting London, to much acclaim I should say, where I had the enormous pleasure of interviewing one of the greats of Broadway. Let's hear that interview held in public in front of an audience of composers in a space near London's Charing Cross from 2009. I'm sure you'll enjoy this conversation with the wonderful Charles Strouse. Musical Talk, the UK's independent musical theatre podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, when somebody is described as a genuine Broadway legend, it can be very difficult to find anything else meaningful to say. Almost any other description will fall flat. So I think it's best to let the facts speak for themselves. Our guest this evening has written for Cheetah Rivera, Dick Van Dyke, Ray Bolger, Sammy Davis Jr., Lauren Bacall, Len Cariou, Michael Crawford, Larry Kerr, Donald O'Connor, Sarah Brightman, and discovered Sarah Jessica Parker. He's worked with Lee Adams, Frank Lesser, Mel Brooks, Hal Prince, Betty Comden and Adolph Green, John Schlesinger, Stephen Schwartz, Sammy Kahn, Alan Jay Lerner, Art Laurents, and the late Rudyard Kipling. He's the composer of Bye Birdie, Annie, Applause, Golden Boy, Nick and Nora, It's a Bird, It's a Plane, It's Superman, Rags, Flowers for Algernon, All Dogs Go to Heaven, and that's not even the beginning of the list. He's had shows produced in every decade since the 1950s. He's written for both Broadway and London, and Dick Van Dyke has called him one of the great ones. So may I introduce to you, ladies and gentlemen, one of the great ones, Charles Strouse.
You left out Alan Jay Lerner, or did you?
I can go back and do it again if you like. Thank you very much indeed. Well, the way this evening's going to run, if you're happy and if everyone's happy, is I'll be asking a series of questions and there will be a dedicated question and answer session at the back. So there'll be an opportunity for questions at the end, but we're quite an informal group, so if anything comes up during the course of the discussion, if you're happy, we'll take questions on the floor as we go.
I'm happy, very happy.
And of course, being a group of friendly writers, obviously the discussion today, I hope, is going to sort of concentrate partly on that. But it will, of course, that will be in the context of your, if I may say, illustrious career. There's going to be plenty of this, so I hope you're going to get used to it. Start with your early career and influences, if I may. You once wrote a song called Everybody Wants to Do a Musical. So when did you first realise that you wanted to do a musical?
I can't tell you the date, but my mother played a lot of pop music when I was a child. But I went to music conservatory, and where I was taught what we laughingly call serious music, and that was my ambition. I wrote a string quartet, piano sonatas, piano concertos, and when I got out of music school, I had to make a living, as we all do, and I became a pianist. That is around town. In New York, like London, is a very active theater scene, and I found myself playing for actors who wanted to audition, for dance classes. With dance class, playing for ballet classes was particularly helpful to me. I didn't know it at the time, but ballet masters insisted on very strict tempos when the dancers were at the bar or doing an adagio, and I learned. I considered the most valuable experience of my life in certain ways because some of the old ballet teachers, the maîtres, they carried sticks. But I did a lot of that, and I coached singers and actors who wanted to. At the time I was doing it, the Broadway musical, the New York musical, economically was forced into the position of nobody could be a dancer in a show. At that particular point, there was no dancing chorus, or very much less. Now it's kind of done it again for reasons I don't totally understand. So actors found themselves wanting to learn musicals. Typically, I would audition, write piano parts, transpose, and play auditions for them for the major composers and lyricists of the day. And I was in the pit, and I hated it. I played in bars. There was a street in New York on 52nd Street where they had jazz clubs later, but it was originally strip clubs. I played for strippers, and I just got into the world of pop music. I was playing in all kinds of ways, and it led to a feeling about music. I mean, I even played in a Roomba band, and I remember how embarrassed I was because A, I was very fat, and B, I had to wear these ruffled sleeves, and everyone would have a 10-minute break, and I felt so sheepish among all these Latino people, and then, as I say, I played in strip joints, I played in bars, I played a lot in restaurants where nobody listens. They're having dinner. So at any time I go to a restaurant and there's a pianist there, I try and make it my business to say, I think you play very well, unless he or she doesn't, and that I really understand what it's like. You get inured to the fact that nobody listens. But when you learn the instrument, you learn to play it well, and a teacher was listening, and your parents were listening, and all these guys, and I was one of them for years, played in restaurants where nobody listened. It kind of flattens you out. Oh, so that's how I got into that, because I had to make a living when I got out of music school.
You were talking about the feelings then, actually, because you've said early on you weren't passionate about music. That's before you attended the Eastman School of Music, where you met Aaron Copland. And
I met him later. I got a scholarship to a place in the U.S. called Tanglewood, and it was a thrill for me because Aaron Copland was teaching composition there, and I got to be a student of his, a scholarship student, and worked with him for 3 years. And he was a great influence on my life, and as an orchestrator too, particularly, which was my first work in New York, to orchestrate.
Well, you've actually raised on two issues there, because I just wanted to know, was it he who helped develop the passion, and how important is that to maintain in the world of musical theatre?
Well, it's a funny thing in my life, and I hope it interests. In teaching musical composition is a very difficult thing for the teacher, and also the thing. Aaron was very helpful, mostly in orchestration. He didn't express his opinions. He expressed his reactions based on what I consider now a wise appraisal of the kind of talent I had, which was, he was a pupil of Nadia Boulanger, and he actually got me a scholarship to work with her, which I did for a year in Paris. And these people were very important. Boulanger in particular was a psychologist as well as a great musician. She saw in me a talent for light music and told me that, whereas the music I brought her was what we call late Stravinsky, neoclassic music. That's all I was writing. She said, "Now, have you played me everything?" I said, "Well, all my important works." And I was working at the time, I remember, on a two-piano sonata, which I thought was sheer genius. And she said, all right, we went through all my music, and she made comments, like, this is you, this is somebody else. And she was very, very perceptive, considering the fact that I was much younger, and considering the fact that I didn't know how worldly she was. She said, is this everything? I said, well, when I was 9 years old, I wrote some songs to amuse my mother, who was a very sad woman. She said, play me some of these. Oh, I said, oh, my God. These were things I was a kid. And they had American references in it, which she couldn't possibly know about. She said, play it. So I did. I played these songs that I wrote, and she absorbed it with the same seriousness that she did my great two-piano sonata. And as I say, we worked for years. She's a splendid musician. And at the end of that year, when I left Paris, she said to me that I had a talent for light music. And it didn't come as a surprise, but it came to me as a half-remembered put-down, as well as but I've learned subsequently that the French are not afraid of pop music, the way the American serious composers, I can't speak for every one of them, but the ones I know that I studied with are disdainful. They were disdainful of Gershwin in his day. So when I was playing piano in these restaurants and all of that thing, it all kind of rubbed off on me, and my mother's influences and all. And I was offered what turned out to be my first Broadway show when I was playing rehearsal piano for Saratoga and Howard Keel, and I was in the pit, and the stage manager of that show said to me, Buddy, I was known as Buddy, which is a personal story, but I was all my life, and he became synonymous to me with the loser, the fat kid. I had no sense of who I was. I never stood up for anything, and anyway, this show turned out to be Bye Birdie after around 7 years of auditioning, and there's so much luck, and I've had it. I'm not humble, but I am by nature modest, because I have worked at music a long time, and I feel a great deal of it has been that I've had very good luck. I wrote this song, I wrote this show, and then I wrote Annie. I didn't expect that to happen, because first of all, right before that, I've written a show with Lee Adams. We wrote it on Superman, and it got very good reviews, but nobody was interested. The business fell off during the summer and just closed. And it's hard to bear. And then there's the next day, and it's all forgotten. So I've been very lucky.
How do you write a song?
Well, if it's a song for a show, I have a talent for imitating, for identifying with the heroine or hero, or the moment that a group of people are together, and it would have an emotion that's not only recognizable, which it is in the libretto, but that tempts me to want to show off, so to speak, that these three people have something in common, and that is that they all want the death of the Count, or they all want to make sure that so-and-so is married to him before she gets to her, and that tempts me to write a trio, and there my musical training has come in handy. It means a great deal to me to be able to write counterpoint to the extent that people are singing different things. It's technically needs a little bit more polish than say writing a song, but writing a song, it's hard to know. Probably in some ways the most famous song I wrote was Tomorrow, and yet we wrote it as a piece of carpentry at the time, because there was a scene where the little girl finds a dog. She has escaped from the orphanage. A policeman catches her and says, "What are you doing, little girl, out in the cold?" She has this scene where he turns out to be a good cop in one way, and he's also tender-hearted, and he says, it's too cold, get back here. But Martin Charnin, who directed it, had a scene change, and we had to end up in about 2 minutes longer than the scene was back at the orphanage. And the thing was, she was in front of a wall that had billboards on it. The wall slid away, another wall went another way, and your eye followed it, and suddenly you were in the orphanage. But we needed, I mean, it was never one decision, another 2 minutes. And actually that song, which has been so successful, was written to eat up those 2 minutes. We knew it should be a song of hope because she was a little plucky girl, and we wrote that song. And I remember for months after it was first introduced, and Summer Stock Weather Show, by the way, was a failure, but it used to get a terrific hand, and I would go back in the audience and say to Martin, that's such a wonderful set change. Because I always thought they were applauding the set change. It never, I can't say it never occurred to me, but what really occurred to me was that it was very slick what he did. And then, months later when it became a hit and the song, everyone recorded and all, I said, gee, we hit it. But we hit it. It's an interesting thing about writing music, that it occupies time, and it, of course, it brings forth emotion, but sometimes it's used in the theater as a means to an end, as well as, this is my masterpiece to the stars or something. And that was one case of it. And it's happened a few times in my life.
We spoke about how do you write a song. I'm going to ask you the sequel question, which is possibly even blander, if you like, but how do you write a show?
Well, I'm usually, I'm not the main motivation of this show, but for a while, I was just asked by people, because I had a couple of hits. Then I had a few flops at the wrong time in my career, shows that ought to have been, I thought, great successes. And there's a generational thing which I'm very self-conscious about. I'm not 80. I'm actually 42. But we found out that if you make it a big thing about it, like Andrew declared he was 60, they gave him a big concert, and Steve Sondheim declared at one point that he was 75. So some people with whom I published, they said, why don't we say you're 80? But I'm here to tell you I'm 42, actually. But they're celebrating my 80th birthday. My wife heard this, that I was 42. She was 13 when we married. What was my point? Well, there's an interesting thing. That's an interesting thing. I wanted to say that. I thought about saying that last night. And in thinking about saying that, my mind went somewhere I hadn't intended it to go. And I think that's one of the secrets of writing music. And I'm sure it's the same for the literary side of what we all do too, that it's a very hard thing to hold on to a thought, and sometimes it's a very wrong thing to hold on to a thought, to just remember one word from it sometimes if you're free enough. And your question was something about how do you write it.
Write a show, and then we talk about generational differences.
Well, the generational differences are something I have to put up with, and it bothers me, frankly. There are a lot of new shows opening on Broadway with composers much younger than I, because of the success of High School Musical and all that kind of thing. And I don't know whether our population has grown, but there's a great big kids thing about the theater now, which I don't feel as though I belong in. I also feel I could do it much better, but they don't want the people who do it are people who really know how to go, you know, and everyone goes like this. And
you should get a Tony for that, by the way.
What?
Get a Tony for that.
And they get a Tony for it. And I feel left out, frankly, sometimes.
It seems to me that actually that there's a sort of golden thread which is observable in all your work, actually, and that's a very strong sense of melody. That's my take, and I can always tell a kind of Strauss song when I hear one. Is that an aspirational thing that you have? Do you think this has got to sound like something I do, or does it just pours out of you as it would?
Well, certainly when it comes out in the golden words you've used, yes, it is an aspiration, but I don't sit down and, if anything, I sit down and say, that sounds just like Cole Porter or something. I kind of pull back from that. But I would like to be known as a melodist. I would like to be popular. I'd like to be as popular as Mick Jagger.
You are with us.
Yeah,
what?
You are with us.
You've come to the right building, if I may say.
And to hear you say that you think my songs are melodic, that means a great deal to me.
I'll write it down if you like. You've actually said on record that you consider that the basic theme of your work is a triumph of life over death. You said that in a 1985 interview.
Did I?
You did indeed. I'm sure you remember it.
Well, I still feel that way, yeah.
How do you infuse that into your work? Because that's quite a striking position.
I never realized I said that. It's funny, I've just written a piece where such a triumph occurs. I don't know, I guess I got associated with other writers who did that. It's also because it fights something in me, which is an intimate thing to talk about, but I had to fight this this triumph of death in my family, in my mother in particular, but my father was also very sick during my life, and my natural instinct is to take a bleak view of things. One of my great teachers, I hadn't meant to tell this, but when Applause opened, it opened in a city called Baltimore, which is a kind of out-of-the-way place from New York, and it opened to Applause, which I found not. If you've had experience in the theater, which I assume most of you have, you can tell by the odd cough or the sniggering laugh that comes from upstairs that the audience isn't really attending it. And this was a big, big show, and a lot of money, and a star who had never sung, Lauren Bacall, world famous. And after the show, after opening night, we all went back to her suite, and there was a reporter, critic, from a magazine in America called Look magazine, which at the time had around 25 million circulation. It was very important. And I remember that Lee and Betty and Adolph and all, we were all kind of...
just say Betty's Lauren Bacall, doesn't she?
What?
Betty is Lauren Bacall.
Oh, well, no, I was going to say that Betty and Adolph was Betty Comden and Adolph Green, who wrote the book for Applause. And this guy was there, and we were all serving him. I remember Lee was saying, "Would you like another Coke?" You know, and I said, "Maybe you'd rather that chair." We were all sucking up to him, and I happened to have read a small magazine that gave the show what we call a bomb review, a flop. It wasn't happening that night, and I knew it for real. But we all said we were being so nice to this guy because he was a critic. He was going to write an article on Bacall. It was the first musical. This was the opening night of it, and we became like slaves, you know. And you sure you're comfortable? Oh, I'm sure she'll be up in a minute. Yeah. How are things in New York? You know, we were doing anything to make him comfortable and right. And we were very nervous. And finally, Miss Bacall, whom we do call Betty, our friends call her Betty, she came in, and as soon as she came in the room, photographers appeared and flash bulbs and everything, and she said to this guy whom we were groveling in front of, she said, "Well, what did you think of it?" And he said, "Well, I thought it was very interesting." And she said, "Go fuck yourself." And the entire balance changed in the room. He was suddenly groveling at her feet. And I said, "This is the greatest lesson I could learn," because I couldn't say that. I really couldn't. I still can't today. But she, I don't know what she was feeling, but she taught me a great lesson of saying what you want, what you need, and it means a great deal. And it's affected my writing too. She was a very big influence on me, though she's a tough lady. You know, she's shown me in many ways, if you said, because she's been famous forever, and she is tough, but I thought that was one of the great lessons that no psychiatrist could have taught me. That was a strange thing in my life, in our lives, that somebody said that they knew somebody who knew Lauren Bacall, and we thought she would be ideal for this. It needs a aging but really glamorous star, and we got to play for her up in her apartment, and we played her 5 songs that we had written, and she said, "I like this. It's very good." It was that simple. She didn't sign right away, which puts you in a spot. I mean, it's a good spot with a big star. We had it with Sammy Davis too. They have agents, but that was what we did, and it suddenly became known that she was going to do it, and then of course the backing came in quite easily.
Talking of applause, which is the show from which this happened, you did very kindly suggest that you might be prepared to play the piano. I just wondered.
Oh, sure.
Now might be a good time just for.
Yeah. You want me to play applause?
Whatever. I'd like you to play whatever you'd like to play. To be honest, I'm sure I'd like to hear something.
I'd say truthfully, I didn't prepare to play anything, but I love playing what I've written. And since you mentioned it, should I play applause?
Yes.
There was no.
Have we got Lauren Bacall available?
What is it that we're living for? Applause, applause. Nothing I know brings on the glow like sweet applause. Thinking you're through, that nobody cares, when suddenly you hear it starting, and somehow you're in charge again, and it's a ball. Drop is all sing, life seems to swing, and you're the king of it all. The sound that says love. Applause, 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 applause,
The sound that says love.
What?
The sound that says love.
Yes, the sound that says love. For lyrical ways.
I might prevail upon you, if you don't object, to play at least one more for the moment. As you're sitting there, it seems so convenient.
Yeah, no, I love doing it. It's
going to be your lucky night then. What would you? Is there a piece that you're working on at the moment? Because I know that one of the great pleasures, and I'm getting onto this in the future.
There is a new show that's opening in California called Minsky's, which was originally in another life, suggested, directed by Mike Ockrent, a British director, and he died, and that was the end of the show, and it was picked up somebody who liked the score. This is a way of saying I don't know anything from the show. I wrote the music for the movie, if any of you see that, if they ever show that, The Night They Raided Minsky's, which was produced by Norman Lear and directed by Billy Friedkin. And I mean, it brings forth things. I don't know how much time you guys have. We have nowhere to go.
Yes.
Yes.
We're halfway through.
The casting,
we've got time for you.
What?
We've got time for you.
Okay. The casting was problematic in that show and in the movie, and we wrote a song to be sung. Well, I have to go back a little bit. We wrote a show called All American. I wrote with Lee and Mel Brooks, and it's a fairly show-wise crowd here, I assume, and so I can't tell you it was a success. It was not. It was a fairly. But originally, it was about a Slavic professor who comes to America and falls in love with America for many of the reasons that Americans are ashamed of, that we're vulgar and brash and all that kind of thing. We wanted a European actor, and I actually flew to London and played it for Ron Moody, who liked it, said he was going to do it, and our director, who was a man of a different generation than we were, Joshua Logan, didn't want Mr. Moody, and found a way to not sign him for the show, and instead signed Ray Bolger, who is a typical American performer, well known. He asked Ray Bolger to do the show, and Josh was running it, and Ray decided to play the role in his version of a Slavic accent, and I knew the show was in trouble because one day at rehearsal, Mel Brooks turned to me and said, "Why is Ray speaking Japanese?" And from there on, it was kind of it was downhill. But in the movie of The Night They Raided Minsky's, we wanted to. I don't know whether this will mean anything to you. We had the same example of miscasting. We had a title song, The Night They Raided Minsky's, and we wanted it sung by an old rabbinical Jew who was remembering the days on Delancey Street, and Billy Friedkin signed Rudy Valley in the role. Well, that may mean nothing to you, but Rudy Valley was the typical classical Presbyterian. I mean, he was not that type. So
He's a pre-Bing Crosby kind of crooner, isn't he?
yeah, he was a crooner, and the song, which is done in the film, I guess I'll play it. I'm looking to my wife. She goes. Well, I'll play some of it. This is the way we saw it done by this. Many are the ladies I have lied to. Many were my happy nights, and yet the night they raided Minsky's is a night I can't forget. On the night they ended prohibition, old Delancey Street was plenty wet. But the night they raided Minsky's is a night I can't forget. We were watching TV from Gay Paris and heard artistic dance, when just by chance her dress tore in two. What were we to do? And then the cops and every man turned pale. Boy, what a brawl! They arrested us all. We finished our dance in jail. Now I'm very old. just my memories. Now my greatest thrill's a cigarette. Put the light there at Minsky's. Night there at Minsky's. The night there at Minsky's is the night I can't to Rudy Valley, which I say could not be more miscast, and but that it happens. One of the things that, on the other hand, the shows that I've had, Dick Van Dyke, who was I can't say nobody, but he certainly was not well known, and when finally the money was gathered for Bye Birdie. This was after many, many, many years of playing it for people, and I appreciate if you've done the same thing. When Bye Birdie, Mike Stewart, who wrote the book, had a manager by the name of Hillard Elkins, and he was offered a big job at a major theatrical talent agency in New York. Couple $100,000 rent. He would be salary. He would be a vice president. It was a big agency, and he said, "Look, if I could bring Bye Birdie, which was in the incipient stage, to them as part of the thing, and you guys, it would really help my position." We said, "Great." First of all, we had no representation. And so we went down this very big talent agency, and all the big agents were there, and we played the first act, that is, we played 6 songs there. But for the second act, none of them came back. And this was something where we were supposed to be the enticement. There were just a couple of secretaries, their secretary, I'm sorry, Mr. So-and-so had to leave. He had a very important, he has a phone call from London. And so we played the rest of the show for the secretaries. And it was one of the more humiliating moments, and I mention it to you because maybe, unfortunately, that's the kind of thing, there was not something that anybody wanted. And when we finally signed Dick, he was not even a success at the beginning. And then we put in, it's one of my better known songs. Gray skies are gonna clear up, put on a happy face. Brush off the clouds and cheer up, put on a happy face. And spread sunshine all over the place. Just to put on a happy and fortunately he made us good too, but he became a star out of that, and we remained friends all these years. One of the nicest men I've ever known, and friendships are hard to keep in show business, and I imagine you've all experienced. They're very intense, and then they disappear. So, and that was a song that didn't exist until Mike and Gower Champion rewrote the show so he could sing it first. Before, he was not meaning anything in the show. So there's so many elements that.
Now, you've just touched upon something that was the next question anyway, so it's so convenient. And that was, you were talking about how that song didn't work until it was replaced in the show during the early stages. You've also said the opening songs on my shows have always been replaced. Oh. And we all know, if we've read any memoirs about Broadway, that from the moment you finish what you think is the score, it isn't finished, and you spend all your time writing and chucking out during tryouts. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? And when have you made the wrong decision to throw a song out and write a new one instead of tinker with a song and make it better, or have you never?
Well, the second part of the question I don't know how to answer because I've never been in the position or felt myself in the position that a director is in. And if it's the wrong song, and we all agree that the audience is not focused on it, I mean, out it goes. This particular song was something that was not working in the show at all. And somebody was Marge Champion, who was Gower's wife, suggested that we put it in the beginning of the show. And it worked like a charm. But I give her credit for that. I certainly love the song, but we didn't know. We had a number of opening numbers for Applause, which the director choreographer said, I can't stage it, I don't feel the rhythm, and we finally wrote one that worked. We used to be afforded the luxury, and we were with Annie, of being out of town. We had 9 weeks at a stock company called the Goodspeed Opera, where we watched it in front of audiences all the time. And as I say, most of us who've gotten good at this listen very acutely to an audience, and you can tell when they're engrossed. And we worked on it and worked on it and worked on it. And finally, at the end, we got it so it worked.
As you've said, actually, you simply have to write it, and then let the audience guide you.
I would say that is a way of describing the process that I've gone through. And you know, and it touches upon, I forget who asked the question about, or maybe I was just asking the question and trying to answer it myself, about what is good. Do you listen to an audience, or do you say, they may not like it, but this is what I wanted the play to say? And that's a tough one to, it touches on the very deepest part of my needs, because I need to be liked in the theater. And so when an audience has said to me, they're not paying attention during this musical scene, or they're not moved to big applause, I tend to take it out. In fact, I have a very slight reputation of being somebody who says, get the song out quickly, and sometimes a director has saved it. This was one example. That song I wanted out of the show.
It's a very good piece of salvage, if I may say.
It was for me, and you know, it's a gamble. Roll the dice.
Could we move on? Oh, I'm so sorry.
I just want to ask about the Goodspeed process, because I've been to Goodspeed. They were lovely and allowed us to, the Tisch students were allowed to go and stay there for a week in their lovely houses that they have, and to write and to visit the venue. And I'm curious about the process that you went through at Goodspeed. What kind of draft did you put on its feet to begin with when you did Annie there?
What kind of draft at the beginning?
Yeah.
Well, I can name the negative factors that we eliminated. One thing, the little girl who played Annie originally, was very pretty and very sweet and had a beautiful voice, a lyric voice. And the show wasn't working. And also we made FDR into a bit of a buffoon, and that wasn't working. And then we did not have a song called Easy Street, where the cynicism of Mrs. Hannigan was leavened by having her have a big musical number. That wasn't working. And
but it wasn't a very first draft that you put on stage, was it, to begin with?
Well, there's almost no such thing as a first draft put on stage, because there are too many people involved.
Okay.
You always have a lighting designer, a set designer, not to mention the choreographer and the director, who are constantly tinkering with the idea of, you know, putting up shelves. Somebody says, you know, the screws have to be there, even though you designed it another way. So by the time it gets up in front of an audience, it's been tinkered with. And of course, we, the authors, have tinkered with it. And then in that case, It was in Connecticut, a smallish state, and there were 17 reviews when it first opened. And the reviews went from really very good to this is the worst thing I ever saw. And they were evenly split. Somewhere in the middle, there were people who gave us a chance, and somewhere at the bottom was can we bury it? Already, it's so interesting because I do not know, I don't know enough about Shakespeare's day, but when his plays were written, I've only seen movies about when they did Romeo and Juliet, but I don't know enough about the history of the time. Did people say, take this, Hamlet, take this off the stage? I don't know.
I'm sure someone did.
Well, I don't know.
It was in ye times.
What?
The review was in ye times.
I don't know, and I don't know enough about Shakespeare to know whether he would have been influenced and said, no, this is a man who couldn't make up his mind, and you'll learn to like it, and listen to the lines closely. I really don't know. It's a problem.
So did you pay attention to the reviews to begin with and make changes?
Yes,
to that?
I did. I was like, an animal that could, I needed the oxygen of people applauding, and I did. We got a very bad review in the most important newspaper right at the beginning, and we sat and analyzed it. What did he mean by this? And you know.
Have you ever been tempted to call a reviewer and say, what did you mean in that?
No, I know that Clive Barnes, who's English, after Bye Birdie, I thought I could indulge my serious side, and I wrote a very, very serious piece about life and death called Six, because it involved six people from all over the world who got together in various numbers, and I poured my heart on it, and somebody was nice enough that they put it on, and Clive Barnes, among others, gave it the most boring review, and I met him one day. I was very crushed by the experience, and I met him one day, and he said, "Oh, that was a wonderful piece that you wrote." And I didn't know what to say. I was curious. I think my wife was with me at the time, and I didn't know whether to stab him, because that's what he had done to me. But then the other part of me was that he liked it. But I don't even know whether he remembered it. He remembered he somehow put something together and had a memory of liking it. But he murdered me in the meantime.
You did get an apology, though, from one of your reviewers, didn't you? Just to finish the story on Annie.
Yes,
was it
Walter Kerr apologized to me.
So it can come out right.
Can I just go back to technical thing? Lyrics first or music?
Oh, I wanted to ask that.
Everyone asks that. I have an answer which is true, but I've said it enough times that I feel as though I'm saying a cliche. But it's very much. Are you married? Yeah. Well, if your marriage has happy moments, it's usually because you say, "You're right. You're right." And I found in collaboration, if the lyricist I'm working with has a strong idea, and even if I don't like it, I find it's best to encourage and get the best out of him. So very often with Lee, it was one thing when I worked with Alan Jay Lerner. He would set music of mine, but his sense of perfection was so keen that there was very little to ever say. But if I ever did say something, he would search the world to change a word if he didn't think it was right. Somewhere in Alan, there was a sense of artistry that there would have to be a word somewhere, let's say a group of writers talking with another writer in a dungeon. He would sense that there is a word that says that, and two of the writers in the room are hostile, or one is Jewish, and he would have a sense that somewhere there is a word that could describe it. And I would say, having worked with him for a few years, that he shortened his life by, he would stay up all night to change but he would always come up with a glorious choice. And I admired him tremendously for that, that there was somewhere that right word. And, you know, I like to feel there is with me the right note or something, but I don't have this kind of genius.
So did he put words together?
He usually did that. There was a queer, collaboration is weird, as probably you all know, but he had a very weird habit, was while I was composing, he would insist on sitting in the room. And for me, it's a very private matter. I didn't know where I was going. And he said, "Don't pay any attention to me, dear boy," and would be reading the newspaper. And then every once in a while, he would drop the newspaper and say, "You know, that last phrase, I thought that had something that would impel it to go up instead of down." And they were usually very wise suggestions. But the reason he did that, he told me, he was, by the way, a notorious, I don't want to say liar, but a notorious maker-up of things that weren't real. I guess that's like lying. But, somehow with Alan, it was different. He said the reason he did that was when he worked with Lowe, Frederick Lowe, and they were still very good friends. He said that Lowe's mother chained him to the piano, and Lowe hated it and would always be trying to leave. So Alan got in the habit of sitting there making sure he didn't leave. I don't know if that's true or not. I mean, he used to make up all. He was just a man I was crazy about. And I first met him on a flight. I think I'm talking too much, but they're all things that are important to me. I met him on a flight to California. I'd never met him before, but I recognized him. He was so famous. And I had forgotten my credit card, my money, my change, which I often do. And I didn't know what to do. There was supposed to be a car from the movie studio that I was going to meet me, but I'd never worked there before. I didn't have a dime for a phone call. So I saw him, and I introduced myself, and he said, he was in first class. I was back there somewhere. And I said, "Miss Lerner, my name is Charles Strouse." And he, "Oh, dear boy," said, "I know who you are." And I said, "I did something I'm very embarrassed about, but I have no money on me. And if my card doesn't meet me, I don't even have, you know, there were no emails, or I have no money." So he said, "I do that all the time." And he said, "Here," and he gave me $40. And we met. We subsequently wrote a show together called Dance a Little Closer. And we did an interview. And the reporter asked, "How did we meet?" And he said, "Oh, it's wonderful. Charles came up to me and playing and didn't know any money, and I gave him $90. And I always find that's the best way to describe Alan Lerner. There was no gain in it for him, and he wasn't hurting anybody. And I always loved that story about it, that he had blown it up in his mind.
You've drawn a very...
Charles.
Yes. Who?
Did he write the lyrics first, or did you?
Dance a Little Closer. He wrote some first. There's a song called "No Man Is Worth It" that I remember he wrote the lyric first on a song which is one of my favorite called what is it? There's always one you can't forget. He wrote it to a tune of mine which he liked. I consider it one of his best lyrics. Hard Knock Life was the only song in Annie that Martin wrote the lyric for first. Martin liked to write to music, but we had just started working together for the first time, and he handed me a full lyric, and I didn't know what Hard Knock Life meant. In fact, it was one of our small arguments. I said, nobody uses that phrase. So after Jay-Z, everybody uses the phrase now. It just varies. I worked with Sammy Cahn. I've always loved my collaborators. I don't think I ever had a collaborator. There was one guy that I worked with. I won't mention his name, but he was so positive about everything that he made me feel suffocating a little bit. I mean, we would be at auditions, and he would say, "No, that actor is not going to be in my show." And I thought, wait a second, it's our show. He was very positive, and we went the wrong ways. But it just varies. That, you know, Alan is a good case. Sammy Cahn was the funniest and the best collaborator in certain ways, because he was very impatient. Do you know who Sammy Cahn is? He was a very impatient, nervous guy, and we would work at 11, never before, and he didn't want to spend more than an hour. He found people, he was very impatient with anybody, but particularly composers. He said, I don't need to spend more than an hour, we can write a song. And as a result, he would come at 11. He wouldn't come a minute before, and he would usually leave at around noon, sometimes 12:30. And he was so impatient that often he'd come, and I had just gotten up. I had breakfast, and so I would, we'd sit down to talk about something, and I might go just to stretch my fingers. And he'd say, "What was that?" And I'd say, "What was what?" And he said, "What you just played." I said, I don't know what, I was just, no, he said that, and he had a little typewriter. He started typing already, but I hadn't written anything. And before you know it, he had a lyric that went, "Since you went away," or something, and would come, and he forced me, so to speak, to do something which was very good for me in a way, because I'm always slaving over something. Should I have gone? Should I have done that? But he had it written already, and he got me to to loosen up, in a way. It was a lot of fun working with him, but it came out of an impatience. He was so nervous, and he said, "All right, I got to go," and that was it. But as I say, I would do, and before you know it, he had coerced me, because the second line, because since you went away, he got a very good second line. "I'll never be the same." So I'll never be the same. I would write, and before you know it, the hour was up, because that's all the time, like a psychiatrist, he would give me. And I'd written a song called "Since You Went Away" or something. And it was a nice method of composing. I suppose, in retrospect, it was a little bit like using a Ouija board, where you say, "What's the answer to life?" and your fingers move to, kill yourself or something, and you say, "Oh." And he was like that, and that he died on me. We wrote a show together, which I thought there was some of the best songs I'd written, but he died, and...
Is that Bojangles?
Bojangles, yeah.
It's still unproduced, isn't it?
It's still unproduced. I've now taken songs from it, because without him around, it was...
What was it like working with Rudyard Kipling? I've got to ask.
With who?
Rudyard Kipling. I suspect he was quite passive, wasn't he?
In a show we did in London, which...
Under the auspices of Queen Victoria.
Yes. Oh, indeed.
Ian Albert.
Yeah, a show that meant a great deal to me, which the Brits did not like. We got some wonderful reviews, but I don't have to...
My dog was in Iron Albert.
What?
My dog was in Iron Albert.
Was it?
And I had to bring the dog up every evening to the Piccadilly Theatre. And it died the night before the last night.
Now we have a reason.
When I was at
Did you have an understudy?
No. Well, yeah, it did. The understudy would always run around the sofa and kneel on stage, but my dog...
Gee, that is so interesting. Did you like the show at all?
Yeah, I did love it.
I did too. It was one of my...
Polly James was good.
Polly James. It was one of my favorite shows, and I felt very, very hurt, really crushed about it, because we had put in so much energy and as a side issue, and it's something that you would understand better than my daughter did. We have a daughter who is a British subject. She was born at the King's College Hospital, and the night she was born, which was obviously very trying for my wife, and we were in a place that seemed Victorian and was about 3 nights after Iron Albert closed. And I wrote in my book how pulled out I was, because here was this glorious girl, my daughter, who, by the way, we named Victoria, and I wrote that I hated everything. I hated my life, but I particularly hated myself. My wife was suffering, and this beautiful girl was being born. All I was thinking about was I've been stabbed. And when my daughter read that section of the book, she liked the book, but she said she was terribly hurt at the moment of her birth. I was thinking of something else, and I understand, and I learned a lot from that, But I put it down because it was the truth. I was sitting there watching my wife in labor, and I'm just thinking about how awful life has been to me. It was not a good moment.
It is, however, actually genuinely a good show. And so it's a fantastic show. There are several people in here. Absolutely.
What?
Several people love the show in here. Not least me, and His Royal Highness is one of the funniest songs I think you've written.
Oh, I love it. We love the entire
Scott.
Yeah, we loved it. We did so much research on it, and we had that woman, that very well-known woman who writes all the biographies, as our consultant.
Lady Antonia Fraser.
Yes. And a superb director. And we had a lot of bad breaks, which I won't go into because they're dull stories of shows that failed, but it was a show that meant a great deal to both Lee and me, and to John, and the woman who wrote the script, J. Preston Allen, who wrote The Prime of Mr. Brody also. And the reviews were... And,
I'm sorry, there's actually a question over there.
I'm sorry.
So when you finish a show like that, you've obviously poured your heart into it, and it's been a failure. How do you then pick yourself up to go on to feel that you want to write something else after that? It obviously hurt you very personally. And how do you get back to that thing that you're ready to write again and go off with the confidence that yes, this time you're going to have another hit for?
It's a tough. I mean, it's a decent question, and I think I just do because it's the only thing I know how to do. To be as honest as possible, I wouldn't know what else to do. I never had that many. Don't feel sorry for me. I have a very happy life, but I never had that many friends that I wanted to be with or go out. I'm not a traveler. I hate traveling. And so when the dawn comes up, if I didn't write, I don't know what I do. It's that important, because I spent my life with some wonderful teachers who were great examples to me, and although I'm not thinking of rules of counterpoint at that moment, it's important that it's important to me to work on it. I don't know what, but I understand the question. It's very hard for me to do it. We once went, my wife and I, to on a vacation after one show, which actually was a hit, but and though we had a wonderful time, we just been married, I thought I'm going to go crazy. I can't walk on the sand anymore. I never told you that. But, well, you like gambling, so you found, my wife discovered roulette, so didn't have the same effect. I don't know. I don't know how I do it, but it's the only thing, as I say, I know. But there was a show in New York based on a British pop song called Georgie Girl, and I knew the authors of this show slightly. I can't even remember their name. And Mr. Barnes, Clive Barnes, said in his review that the whole show wasn't worth 8 bars of the song Georgie Girl. I mean, it was a ruinous remark, and just mean-spirited. And I found out later, by the way, that Clive Barnes knew the guy who wrote Georgie Girl, which made it even worse. But the man who wrote the songs stayed in his apartment for a month. He couldn't come out. It ruined his life. He couldn't believe he was so hated. And I always disliked Barnes, although I know him and I'm told he's a nice guy. But for doing that, I don't know how anybody would want to write something so bad about somebody. And I didn't know this composer well, and for a month he couldn't leave his apartment. He just sat there in the dark. And I know that feeling. And I don't know how you get started again. It's so public here, humiliation.
May I ask you about revisiting past glories, though, because you're very unusual in the sense that you've written several sequels. There aren't that many composers who have done that. You've done Annie Warbucks.
Yes.
You've done Bring Back Birdie, and you've also written Rags, which is actually a sequel to somebody else's show in a way.
Well, it is.
Well, the writers.
Oh, it's the sequel to Fiddler on the Roof.
Yes. It's got the same book writer.
The same book writer.
But can I ask you the question? How do you, when you're thinking about writing a sequel, go back to try to recover the feelings you had when you originally wrote it, or do you just see it as another show with the same characters? Do you start again?
Well, in a way, neither or neither, because they've always stemmed from somebody else's wanting to do it. They were big money makers, and I've never really wanted to do it. But I mean, it's as though you ask, what do you do after something? It was a project, you know, and I'm a sucker for that. And in certain cases, it's done me well. But I love composing, and presumably you all love writing, or you know, you wouldn't still be whatever you're doing.
You're obviously a very technical and able musician from your early training. Is there ever a sense, in a way, that ability to do clever, tricky stuff gets in the way of writing a simple, accessible melody?
Yeah, I think so. It's yes. The simple answer is yes, but it made me think about the fact that I know a couple of big words that I could use in a sentence, and I get very I'm not going to use that word. I'm going to just say go away or something. And the use of a word with literary allusions, I'm very conscious of it. So yes, I am conscious of the fact. And here, if I may say, I don't want to embarrass my wife, she's very helpful. Sometimes she will come in and say, oh, I like that little thing you just did. And I said, yeah, and she's often, not that there's a right or a wrong, but she's recognized that there's a quality to it, which I thought, well, it's too easy, it's too hokey, it's too obvious. I'm bothered by, the winds of time. Anything bothers me. I'm very sensitive to the fact that how it does appeal to other people, which is a bad trait, but I'm stuck.
I'm going to ask you, if I may, about Nick and Nora, which is an early 90s show that you did.
Do they really want, you're still with me?
Yeah.
It's okay. I love doing it. I mean, we'll enjoy this moment well after it's over, I tell you.
The reason I want to ask about it, because it actually touches on the technicality issues. The album, which is available, isn't necessarily a full representation of the show, is it? Which I think is actually an extremely complicated piece, where you had songs which flowed into each other, and there was underscoring, which was counterpointing or showing up the lies. It was a detective story. It's a thin man murder mystery. And you said, I think actually in the liner notes, that you wrote it as though you were scoring a film.
That was my idea originally, an idea which Arthur Laurents, who wrote it and directed, concurred with completely, and I warned him that if you go with this idea, I'm not going to ask that you go with it every second of the way, because it would be too complicated. I'm fully prepared to change it, but I said if you do go with it, it's going to make your directing a complicated thing, because the line is, don't you dare do that, and then just as an example, this is not a true one, but that I would have a boom after that before the inspector answered. I wasn't quite as obvious as that, but and I said, I warn you that, and he said, no, he said, I understand what you're getting at. And the first day of rehearsal, he not only didn't or couldn't do it, but he turned into another man. I had he's the only man in the theater. He's brilliant, he's smart, he's funny, he's graceful, he's an amazing man, but he is so mean that, and you can fill in the spaces that you want. I did a lecture at a small a library, and the week before, he had lectured there, and the man who was running this series said to me, after you're done, if you don't mind and people want to ask questions, does that bother you? And I said, no, I love it. And he said that the week before, when Arthur made his speech, that a woman said, Mr. Laurents, I wasn't there, but he told me this, and I believe it about this woman got up and she said, nobody has meant more to me in my life in the theater than you have. And his response was, get a life. Now, if you know Arthur, some part of him thinks that's amusing. He is totally blocked out the feelings that woman might have. But that's the way he talks. And he spoke that way to us, to Richard, Maltby, and me, and he can be so mean-spirited, and yet we had a very close friendship until I started working with him. I don't wish him on any of you.
And perhaps as a direct result of that, you've started writing on your own quite a lot now, because you've also turned your hand, well, you've done it for some years, but you seem to be doing it more to lyric writing as well. You are the proverbial double threat.
Well, I didn't mean to.
It's all right, we don't mind.
Yeah, I wrote a show in New York called Mayor, And in it was a smaller show. Actually, my wife choreographed it. She's a wonderful choreographer, and it was a great success. Not a great success like My Fair Lady, but it got very good notices. And I wrote the lyrics there, and I wrote this opera that Sarah Brightman did here, Peter James at the...
That's Nightingale, isn't it?
Yes, at the Lyric Hammersmith. It's closed. Yeah, I found out that I enjoyed it very much. It was a wonderful process to have 2 sheets of paper there, and to have done, what Sammy did to me, Sammy Kahn, that I would hit a phrase that, something I liked about it, but I write in corners. I don't use the computer, so I had that there, and then I was thinking of the character, and suddenly the phrase of "Where were you?" came to mind, because that was about what the young man was thinking about. Where were you when I needed you? And so I put "Where were you?" under those notes, and before you know it, it became a process that I enjoyed very much, stretching out "Where were you?" And I think I've gotten good at it. And I enjoy it very much, but as I say, I'm facing the same things all of you presumably are. That it's tough to get people to put money into the theatre today.
Does that mean that you're not going to work with lyricists anymore? Or is there still a hope for me?
Not going to write.
Does that mean you're not going to work with lyricists anymore? Or do I still have?
Oh no, it doesn't. On my new show, Minsky's, I'm working with a woman that Mike Ockrent has brought into the thing. And no, I would like to find a new lyricist or a new playwright. I'm always looking to write. I just love doing it. Are you a lyricist?
I'm a book writer, yeah.
Well, we'll meet afterwards.
Yes. Leave your card with the girl on the floor, please.
Are you rich?
No.
No, but I'm very, seriously, absolutely seriously, I'm very interested to find something that I would like to do and somebody else would like to do. And I'm worried about how it would ever get on. And let's say in my case, I would be worried when I'm going back Friday, I think, to New York, that it could be done via email or something. I don't think it could. So, I'm talking fantasy in a way, but yeah, the idea of finding something, and vice versa, that, I can't think of them offhand, but there have been books in my life that I thought, gee, I feel the emotion so strongly that, but it's...
What's your favourite thing to do? Do you prefer adapting something like a book or a play, or do you prefer starting from scratch with a brand new?
Well, the biggest successes I've had, unlike unlike the fashion of today, have been originals. Nobody wrote a musical on Superman. They made up, we all did make up a story, but because of it being such a popular, I don't know whether it was popular here, I know the movie was, but Superman was a comic book, and it was a weird and wonderful idea that these 2 authors had to do it as a musical. We enjoyed it from head to toe, but we were not able to get the rights to a movie. And although the show got wonderful reviews, it didn't work on the stage. But the 2 authors, Bob Benton and David Newman, wrote the film Superman. It was very close to the story we had on stage, but without the satire. And it grossed $400 or $600 million. And where was Nora?
So it did have possibilities, which is one of the songs.
Yes, some possibilities.
Now, any questions from the floor? Because the songs are coming together.
Just about the lyric writing side and the collaboration, do you ever find there's conflict now in terms of the fact that you write your own lyrics as well, in terms of you writing a melody and think already having words there and then having a collaborator take it in another direction?
Yeah, I do, but I try and fight it, And also I've, in the last big piece I've done with Lee, a musical called An American Tragedy, which was based on a very famous American book by Theodore Dreiser. I think it's some of the best work that we have done. In fact, I love the show. My wife directed a production of it, which was very successful, but not open to the public. And Lee and I are so close that he accepted that I'd say, I'd love to write this lyric. And he's just that kind of a guy. He's not at all lazy, but he's not, our one difference was that he was never driven the way I was. I was always driven to write. One of the lowest moments of my life was I was working with Lee, and we were both single, and then he went and got married. And I was not only jealous of the fact that he had found somebody else, but our work sessions, which used to go on till all hours, and then we would go out and have dinner or something, suddenly he was saying, oh, I've got to catch the 403, and do you mind if I leave a little early? And I didn't know what to do with myself. But in that case, we know and like each other so much that he didn't mind, and I thought it worked out well.
Anything else?
Do you find yourself disagreeing with your orchestra? With the amount of training that you've had as an organizer, do you find yourself in conflict with your orchestra at this point?
In conflict with the orchestrator? No, because there's a kind of hierarchy in the theater which the director is on top. But when it comes to musical decisions, I'm the boss in a sense. Also, I make pretty complete piano parts. I have made just, what we call the lead sheet. I know you all know what that is. But as a rule, when a show gets to the point where the number is set in the show, my piano parts are complete enough that it's really a question of, oh, you really think it should be a flute and a clarinet or two flutes? It's not, no, it's not problematic. Now, I'm working with a new orchestrator who is wonderful, but I've never worked with him before, and I don't know whether he'll be bossy. And the guy who did Rags, an orchestrator by the name of Michael Strobin, whom I consider one of the best in the business, he took what I had and really elevated it, in my opinion. But it's usually musicians get along. Famous last words.
I think we're getting towards the end. I'm going to ask you, Charles, if I may, could we ask you to play the piano one more time?
Oh, you're so polite. Yeah, of course I would do. I mean, okay.
If you could just run through your entire scores.
Yes, just play the whole repertoire, I think.
Well, do you want me to play a well-known song or a song that?
What's your favourite? There we go.
I don't know.
You don't have a favourite.
Last Regiment.
Oh, you mentioned that you liked that song. I don't know. I'll play one more. It's a song I actually did think about playing, particularly when I was told to be with a bunch of writers. My wife and I had dinner at, I'll probably screw up the song, but I noticed since the last time we were here, everyone used to say super, that was super, and the word has turned, as far as we're concerned, now this is like 2 nights I've been here, everyone was saying brilliant. There were people sitting next to us, man, bring a bottle of wine over, which it was a brilliant. And somebody said, let's go see a film or something. Oh, brilliant. So I thought, boy, you guys really talk differently than we did. So there's a song that I wrote actually in this show that that my wife choreographed called Mayor, where, and I've played it before in England, that I was reminded how differently we speak English, and that New Yorkers particularly are different, and so I wrote this song that in case you came to New York, it would be like a primer or something. In case you come for just a visit, you may be wondering just what is it makes us New Yorkers speak this certain way. I know the feeling, for the fact is, when I first came, I had to practice till I learned proper things to say. It's not so hard, you'll see. New Yorkers never say, sorry, pardon me, or have a nice day. This New York poetry is easy to learn how. Try this with me now. Watch where you're going, motherfucker. Blow it out of your ear, you sucker. Say these standard things, you can't go wrong. You may use schmuck on all occasions, and if Latinos, blacks, or Asians call you a schmuck right back, then you belong. It's not so hard. No. What? Supposing, what? So somebody pushes you and says, move your fat ass. What is the proper response? Well, the first thing is stick your third finger up and wag it. Supposing she says, who are you doing that to, you faggot? Let the Neapolitan riposte be used. A fango. Learn from me, and you'll see you can be a New Yorker too. That's the idea of this song. I should have rehearsed it, but you get the idea. It's nice to meet my what cohorts, and and all that. So I really enjoy it. I appreciate you coming, and
Ladies and gentlemen, he says he's the man who writes good music for when they change the scenes, but I'm sure you don't believe it's just that. Please thank me once again for Charles Strouse.
Musical Talk. Well, there we are. That was a wonderful conversation that I had in 2009 with the late but great Charles Strouse. And I must tell you that interview and the one you'll hear next week are two of the great highlights, not just of my musical talk career, which is very now nearly 20 years, but of my life. Charles was one of the composers I most liked upon meeting, and a man whose humility and modesty belied his enormous talent. I have no doubt that Charles Strouse will be remembered, and remembered very well, and his works will live on. And talking of those works, in this week's episode we looked at some of his big-name shows. Next week, in the conversation I conducted with Charles more privately on a one-to-one basis, we'll hear not just more about those shows and perhaps in more depth, but about some of those most unexpected highways and byways that litter everybody's creative career. And the one that always intrigues me and still does to this day was Charles's proposed score for a Stanley Kubrick-directed Star Wars musical. It seems impossible to believe, but that was actually on the cards. So do tune in again for our second tribute to the wonderful Charles Strouse next week. That's Charles Strouse, 7th of June 1928 to the 15th of May 2025. A man I was proud to have known even just a little bit. Thank you for listening to this episode of Musical Talk. Goodbye. This episode of Musical Talk, edited and presented by Thos Ribbits. Copyright Musical Talk 2025, except for the songs, where the copyright remains with Charles and his collaborators, and my thanks go to the late Charles Strouse for allowing us to include them in the recording that we made and consenting to their publication in our Musical Talk episodes. To find out more about the world of Musical Talk and listen to past episodes, go along to our website www.musicaltalk.co.uk or subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your favourite podcasts, and follow us on all the usual social media networks. Now, I'm Paul Land.